Good morning. Today, we are continuing with our series of programs on home decor, going through the past, and we have been going backwards in time. So we did 1940s, 1930s, 1920s last week. This week, we're going to take a look at the earlier period, and today we are going to focus on the period from around 1900 until about 1920. And this is a period in which there were not a lot of innovations coming in. The innovative period came just before this. So the furniture we are seeing today had been on the scene for a few years, but was starting to become widespread and accepted during this period. So stick around, we got some pictures coming up. Okay, well, last week we discussed things like electricity. When we went into the 1920s, during that period, the start of the 1920s, about a third of American households had electricity. Well, now we're looking at 1900 to 1920, so it was less than a third. Most people still had gas lighting, if they were in cities. If they were not, if they were in more rural areas, they had oil lamps, candles, and that was how they got their illumination. Of course, telephones, again, 1920s, we had hit that period. That was about a third of people had telephones. And as I said at the time, I question that statistic for a number of reasons, but be that as it may, that's what Ma Bell said they had. So we are now dealing with a period when less than a third of the population had telephones or electricity. Cars had indeed come on the scene in this period, as had airplanes. This is the period that covers the Wright brothers' first flight. This covers Henry Ford and the Model T. Did people have them? No. Rich people had them. Folks like you and I, we would not have had cars. We would not have been flying on airplanes. In fact, even rich people were not flying on airplanes. Between 1900 and 1920, daredevils were flying on airplanes. The Lafayette Escadrille, the World War I pilots were flying airplanes. We were not. This was the province of, Lucky Lindy and Amelia Earhart, and not regular folks like us. The latter part of the period we are discussing was a very difficult time throughout the entire world. World War I broke out in 1914, and just as World War I was coming to an end, there was a horrible pandemic worldwide, Spanish flu. So this was, they must have just seen the horsemen of the apocalypse riding, because we did, in fact, have war. We had plague and pestilence. We had serious problems. Fortunately, for the people who were alive then, this was no new thing. The world was a very different place, and 100 years ago, it was just a much more brutal environment. Life expectancies were not that great. Infant mortality was high. They lived in a much harsher world than we did. On the other hand, they did live in a pretty world, because they did have some very, very nice home decor. Now, before we take a look at the first batch of photographs, I have to point out that this is just about the last period where we are going to see the average American household depicted photographically. Now, the reasons for that are obvious. Photography was not a hobby at this period. Photography was a very involved process of big box cameras and developing the photographs and chemicals and so on. This was not a do-it-yourself job. People could go to photography studios and have their portraits taken, and photographs of people were called portraits at that time. They had not really differentiated between a drawn or painted image and a photographed image. And of course, the wealthy could have a photographer come into their home, photograph them there. But when we start seeing photographs of private homes, when we get much past 1900, when we go into the 19th century, the 1800s, if we're looking at a photograph of a private home, this was not your ordinary home. This was going to be the home of somebody who was wealthy, influential, could afford a photographer to come in and take a picture of them in situ, as it were. By the way, that in situ only means in their natural or ordinary situation or circumstances. For the rest of us, no. If you wanted your picture taken, you would get on the horse and ride into town and have the photographer take a picture of you there. And there was a very unusual phenomenon that took place during this period, and it actually predates this. It was late 1800s through about 1920, which is photographing the dead. When someone died, sometimes people had nothing to remember them by. They would not have been photographed in their lifetime. So it became a custom, gruesome as it sounds, to photograph the deceased person. And even more gruesome, sometimes they were posed in huge family photographs. Everyone would cluster around the dead person and the photograph would be taken. And it's interesting because you had to sit very, very still for a long period of time in order to capture the image. So often in these photographs, the live family members would be a bit blurry, but the dead person, who was perfectly capable of sitting still for a very long period of time, that was the image that would come out crystal clear. That's one of those strange but true. And there have been books written about it. So, yeah, photography is not something we are going to be able to rely on. We can see pictures of individual furniture items, but the way they were organized in households, the way people designed their homes, the way they positioned their furniture, is the sofa on the wall? Is it against, is it blocking a doorway? Is it in front of a fireplace? This is about the last period when we're going to have really good photographic evidence of that. So let's take a look at furniture from 1900 to 1920 as it was in people's homes. And as we saw in 1940, remember the lack of coffee table? Pay attention to the tables here because you're going to see something different. Okay, here we go. Did you notice about half of those rooms, like living rooms, had a table right in the middle of the room? You look at it and you say, wait, is this a living room or a dining room? No, it's a living room. This table that was right in the middle of the room, this was a furniture placement that goes back at least 100, 150 years, probably longer. The work that was done in the household was done by the women of the household. So if you see draperies on the windows, mom and the daughters and probably grandma, maybe even the aunties, had made them. If you see pretty little pillows on the sofas, somebody was embroidering that fabric and then stitching it into a pillow. And this table in the middle of the living room was a work table. That was where the ladies of the household did their work. And it wasn't just fancy work. It was everything. If you had a pair of socks, it was because somebody in the household made it. If you had a shirt, somebody in the household had made it. And so there was a great deal of work done in the household, usually done in the living room, especially things like sewing, where you wouldn't do it in the kitchen or anywhere else where your fabric might get dirty, where you might need a large expanse, to cut out a pattern. This was very, very customary that this work was done. And they were work tables. And during the ordinary course of events, as household work was taking place, the ladies of the house would be gathered around these tables working with their sewing boxes and their hussifs. Now, what's hussif? It's actually spelled like housewife. And that was, I'll show you what they looked like. This is actually, it's not a hussif. This is a jewelry holder. It's for travel, but this is what a hussif looked like. It would be a little cloth package, and you would have your needles and threads in your little pouches. You would roll it up. Voila! That's where you kept your stuff. Needles, pins were valuable. The thread had to be purchased. You could make a shirt if you had a needle, a thread, and some cloth and a few pins. And this is what they were doing. So it's important to remember that in this period, that parlor, what we would now think of as a living room, was a workroom for the ladies of the house. And it was, in fact, not just the fancy work or the mending. I have seen photographs of cabinetry made by bored Victorian housewives. This was a period in which women were no less intelligent, capable, ambitious than they are today, but in which they had very limited ways to express that. So if a woman had talent, she got a coping saw. She started making a scroll work bookcase. We don't think of that. We tend to think of these women as sitting around on their prim little chairs with their little embroidery, la la. No, some of them had leather aprons and hammers and nails. And some of the work that was created by these women was just staggering. Just because they were girls didn't mean they couldn't do it. We also have other things coming out. If there was a picture on the wall, 9 times out of 10, that was a picture that was drawn or painted by someone in the family. Because going out and getting portraits, having an artist come and create a portrait of the family. By the way, most of the art in average homes was, in fact, portraiture. The idea of landscapes or art just for the sake of decoration was coming in the 20th century, earlier periods. Now, if it was a picture on the wall, it was probably Grandpa's portrait or something that was done by one of the members of the household, usually the ladies. So our parlor at this period is very much a workroom. And the little hussip or the sewing box, if company was not coming, that would be front and center on that box, along with the female members of the household gathered around doing work. And as I say, everything from fancy embroidery right down to mending the tear in Papa's breeches. So these were workrooms. Now, the furniture that you saw was typical furniture of that period. And there are a couple of styles of furniture that I want to take a look at in particular. The first one I want to show you is what's called arts and crafts, or mission, or stickly. You'll hear all three of those terms used almost interchangeably. I suppose the most general and all-encompassing term would be arts and crafts. And this was, again, as most furniture styles, it was a rejection of the intricate, fussy, Victorian, heavily carved furniture, and its emphasis was on solidity. Oak was very, very popular, usually, although not always, but quarter sawn oak. And the bookcase here, that is quarter sawn oak. That's an Eastlake piece. It's not an arts and crafts piece. Quarter sawn oak was more expensive because the wood had to be cut in quarters to get the fancier oak grains. So it's not straight grain, usually quarter sawn white oak. Often the joints were exposed. They were usually done with mortise and tenon joints, and that's a piece of wood going through a hole, and you could actually see the tenon coming through at the top. They would create a little sort of pyramid shape and turn it into a decorative element. Arts and crafts being the more general term, more specifically, you'll often hear it called mission because there was, in fact, a very famous piece of furniture from this period. It was, I believe it was a desk that was made for the Swedenborgian church out in San Francisco. And that's where the mission connection came from, that it came from a church. Mission furniture, and Stickley, Gustav Stickley, was one of the leading designers of this furniture. So let's take a look at mission furniture and notice how very dependent this furniture is on the wood and the wood surface. This is about the beauty of the wood and not about fancy carvings, not about fancy upholstery. It's all about the construction of the furniture. Mission, Arts and Crafts, Stickley, here we go. Yeah, you can see that that would have been something people would have said, oh, I don't like Victorian because this is sort of anti-Victorian. If Victorian is on this side of the fence, the Mission is on that side of the fence. Beautiful furniture, extremely collectible. We are very fortunate in my area because we can pick up Mission rocking chairs for $5 or $10. And I tell Jocelyn all the time, one of these days we got to get a truck. We got to load it up with Mission furniture and we've got to take it to California because that stuff is very, very popular out there because they have a lot of bungalows, and this is perfect for those arts and crafts bungalows. This is the furniture that would have been in those bungalows when they were built. California does not have a lot of it, and boy, does this stuff go for serious money in California. So one of these days, Jess and I are going to get a truck. We're going to load it up. We're going to go to California. We're going to make so much money we can retire in a weekend. Now, another kind of furniture we need to look at here is Art Nouveau. Now, we talked about that when we discussed Art Deco in a previous episode about a month ago. Art Nouveau is very flowing, very organic, beautiful, beautiful furniture. And again, very anti-Victorian. This is furniture that was intended to emulate the shapes one would find in nature, of flowing designs, ocean waves, beautiful branches of trees, petals of flowers, gorgeous stuff. And I was able to get some terrific Art Nouveau pictures for you. And I believe that I'm leaving these up for 9 seconds. I think that's what I was doing because we're going from 3 seconds to 6 seconds, but some of these, if there's a lot of busyness going on, I'm going to give you 9 seconds. So let's take a look at Art Nouveau. This stuff is to die for. It's beautiful, isn't it? By the way, one of those pieces, I'm sure you noticed, it was one of the last pieces. It was a telephone bench. It was a sofa, and then up in the corner, no, wait, over here. It was in the left-hand corner as you look at it. There was a little box built right into it. That's where the telephone went. I know when you see it, you're probably thinking, what, did they keep a bird in there? Because that was my first thought. It's like, geez, if I had something like that, it would be a cat tree. The cat would be living in there, pouncing down on people. Cat, by the way, is asleep behind me. And we're just going to hope he stays that way. Art Nouveau furniture. It's just gorgeous. It had come out of the 18th century and was very popular during this period. However, as I'm sure you could see from those pieces, this was not furniture that was going into the average household. This stuff was, it was beautiful. It was expensive. It was one-off pieces, one-off bespoke. These are all words for custom-made items. So these were not mass-produced. They couldn't be. It was just... So what was mass-produced? There is one item that has survived right through to modern times. And this is something I wanted to show you in particular. This was something that was in the kitchens of most homes. And this is the press back chair, sometimes with a cane seat, sometimes without. So let's take a quick look at press back chairs. I'm sure you've seen those all over the place. And they were actually reproduced pretty extensively in the 70s and 80s. That was kind of a thing. Press back oak chairs. It just had a resurgence then. This is also a piece of furniture that, for those of you who are attracted to that rustic country farmhouse sort of interior decor, oh yeah. And the originals can still be had for almost, well, around here, $5 or $10 a piece. And you can, oh, you trip over them. You can find them in dumpsters. They are extremely common around here. That was a type of furniture. And along with some pieces of arts and crafts, a lot of that furniture was coming out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, where they had big furniture factories, mass-produced, inexpensive. You open a Sears catalog from 1910, and you are going to see those chairs for $1 or $2. They were just all over the place. Again, this is something that was turn of the century furniture. And it's something, as I say, we still see today. So that is what was happening between 1900 and 1920. Now, before we sign off, I want to tell you about something wonderful that happened at my house yesterday. I got a box from Lisa at DesertDragonworks. So it was like Christmas morning at my house. And we have, oh look, pens. This pen in particular, when I picked up this pen and held it, I was like, whoa, I can't use this pen. And then, because left-handed people are abundant in my family, I flipped it. We have a left-handed fat pen. Okay, so remember this for the giveaways. Left-handed flat pen available. And let's take a look at another of Lisa's pens. Here we go. Look at that one. Is that amazing? And she's really going to town on these things. Beautiful pieces. And where? Here. Right here. This is the one that might not leave. It will. I love you. It will go. Look at this. Beautiful steampunk pen. Oh, it's tempting me. And a quick heads up about the giveaway I am announcing tomorrow. Let's take a look at what else Lisa sent. Okay, here we go. She sent a whole set of flatware. like this. Now, the other one here. Beautiful soup spoon. And where's our fork? Here is our fork. Tomorrow, when the giveaway is officially announced, I'll give you some nice close-up pictures of this. This stuff is gorgeous. So that giveaway is going to be announced tomorrow for that flatware set. It is just magnificent. So if you or someone you know has a physical impairment and you need the nice flatware, the nice chunky stuff, that's going to be our giveaway for next week. Big special giveaway. I'll show you the pictures. Wow. Christmas morning. I'm still poking through the pens. Just, oh, they're so pretty. So, as usual, pen giveaways, but now we have so many more pens. And keep your eyes out tomorrow. I'm going to announce the flatware giveaway, and that will be our giveaway for this weekend, the big one. And I will see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we are going to get into one of my favorite furniture styles, bookcase, Eastlake. So we're going to have photographs of Eastlake. We are going to have photographs from Charles Eastlake's book as well. So this is the real Eastlake, plus some photographs of some of my own Eastlake stuff. All right. So have a fantastic day. I will see you all tomorrow.